Greetings, salutations, and welcome to the Kreeger cast. I'm your host, Patrick Kreeger, and I'm joined today by Emma.
Hey!
Today she's going to be talking with us about her spooky experiences, mostly.
I would say so. They're damn near pretty close.
So, where do you want to start with this?
Well, we can start with my great uncle Nathaniel, and this one happens to be spooky because there was some definite, I would say, things that would rarely ever happen, and to have them all happen at the same time is just very spooky, and it's coincidental nature almost. So my uncle Nathaniel Green was talking to one of his longtime friends for about, I think he was friends with her for about 60 years, and he was talking to her that day, and they were talking about a specific page in a book she had written, and it was too high above him, and since he was an elderly man in his late 80s, he decided not to go grab it. The next day, the book suddenly flies off of the shelf and lands on the page they were talking about the previous day. 15 minutes later, the woman he was talking to, daughter, she calls him and reports that her mother had been dead for about 15 minutes, which was the exact same time at which that same book flew off the shelf and landed on the page.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a little weird.
Very weird. It's just, like I said, the coincidental nature / kind of like that lining up of times. Especially given that I've been to his house before, and it's clutter everywhere, but it's definitely gonna stay up there kind of clutter. Nothing's gonna fall off the shelf, so very bizarre.
Very.
But he also has a cemetery in his backyard, so who knows?
Okay, so, dear listeners, as you will come to know based on the release of these podcasts and the order in which they were recorded, I do not believe in the supernatural. So Emma, do you?
As you know, I'm a pretty open-minded person, so I can see both sides having some logic to them, but I think it's always good to remain open-minded and just take all the facts that you can, just to make your life a little more interesting, come up with a little more theories yourself, and if it works out one way or the other, it's totally fine because, it's not some huge stance you have to take on whether you're, spooky or not. Spooky person. That's what I say.
Okay. But you've had encounters with the supernatural.
Yes.
So then how do you not believe in it nearly fully, if that's the case?
Well, because it could also be a scientific thing, like, all energy, you can't destroy it. You can't, because energy is matter, and you can't destroy matter, and energy is continuous, so it could have something to do with energy, or some scientific thing like that. I have no idea.
Okay.
For example, they say that you weigh more before you pass away, and some people believe that's, the weight of your soul leaving your body. In fact, a lot of doctors sometimes believe that, and other people think it's just that release of gas or whatever, fluid, whatever it is when you die.
Oh, the 23
depends.
grams thing?
Yeah, that one. But yeah, energy is conserved, so who knows what happened to that energy kind of thing. But since you were talking about a specific occasion that I haven't told you yet, let's bring that one up about the dog. So right now, I'm living with a woman who has currently 5 dogs, along with my 1 dog, so we have 6 dogs in this house. And she has, of course, had her many other pets that have passed away in this house as well. And it happened to be a day that I was cleaning the hallway, and when I do so, you, of course, have the dogs in the front room, and you block them off with a gate, so that way you can get your cleaning done without the hilarity ensuing of the dog trying to eat the vacuum / make out with it because it thinks it's going to eat you or something. I don't know what they have a problem with the vacuum for, but they do.
Dear listener, just so you know, these dogs she's talking about aren't like corgis. They're about the quarter of the size of a horse.
3 Borzoi and 3 Greyhounds. So, I'm a good 5'6", but 5'7", I guess. And when my dog jumps up on me, he's already about a head higher than me. So you can imagine the size difference in there. So I'm cleaning in the hallway, and I turn around, and we happen to have a brindle greyhound, and I look up and I see a brindle greyhound, and I turn back around. Everything's totally normal until I realize that the same brindle greyhound should be in the backyard. So I get up, walk into my room, and I see him on the other side of the wall in the backyard, and I look at him and then think, okay, if he was there and have the gate up in the hallway, then what the hell did I just see?
Yeah.
So I remembered how the dog's stance was and what it looked like, and I tell my roommate about this, and she's like, okay, where did you see this dog? What the hell? So I told her in the hallway and showed her the exact spot, and she was like, okay, that's where my dog Dallas, another brindle greyhound, passed away. And it was the exact spot that she passed away that she was looking at me from. And it was really weird because I'd never seen a picture of her before. I didn't know where she died in the house. I didn't know what she died of. None of that stuff. But I can still see in my mind's eye her just standing there and staring at me like, what the fuck are you doing in my house? Get out of here. This is my domain. What are you doing here with my, pack? And Moose never does that to me because, he's a kind little puppy. But she sure was the head of the pack when she was alive, and she made sure that that was known to me when I saw her.
By the way, you had actually told me that story before. But
did.
Now that you're saying, I think you told me about it roughly when it happened, maybe.
Yeah. Because I think it was like a shorter version though, or it was a text message probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I want you to know that I do remember that.
Okay, good. I don't want to keep you up at night too much.
Oh, yes. Dear listener, you'll get these in different orders, but, Stephanie told some stories that really kept me awake for a couple hours later than they should have.
Well, I'm definitely going to want to watch those because you know how much I am into true crime and horror and spoopy stuff, so... And I have so many more, and these are all family stories, so...
Well, you're more than welcome to tell them.
Okay. We should probably save the murder for last.
That would probably be a good option.
That would be. How long are these podcasts usually run for, though?
It's however long you want it to be. A minimum of 30 minutes, but, hour and a half can happen.
Okay.
Hour and 10 minutes.
Alright, cool. So something interesting happened yesterday, and it's not really spoopy as it is just kind of weird, and I used to have everyone tell me that they saw the same thing when they were little, and it was the man that runs alongside the car in your imagination when you're a kid.
That's not something I know about, but, I've never experienced that, but yeah, I've heard of this, and
yes.
A lot of people think it's the Wendigo.
Okay.
Or a skinwalker.
Okay. So other people have told me that it's kind of an instinctual thing where you're driving in a car and your brain goes, this doesn't look right, this is not how your body's supposed to function, so let's put some normality in here and have a person walking against the car so your brain basically tells the rest of your body, hey, this is what's going on, you're traveling. And there's something running against you. And I think it's also one of those things that has to do with, like, hunting and traveling. And also just having something that right beside you. And also, you're a bored kid. You're probably imagining a ton of weird stuff on the side of the road.
Indeed. I've never had a vivid experience like that. Really? Yeah.
I had this all the time as a kid, and all my cousins had the same thing. Maybe it's a genetic thing. I have no idea.
Possible.
Or it might just have to do with how you were raised and what weird, creepy stories your parents told you. Because I know that when my mom was being raised in kindergarten in Austria, they gave her these, of course it was in the 1950s, so they gave her little kindergarten books from the 1930s and 40s of Austria and Germany. And one thing they almost always promised to do in these books was if you were bad, they would cut off your toes. And so my mom was very scared of this, and as she was growing up, they always gave her really tight shoes, so she always thought that was part of Austria, was, oh, if my feet don't fit into the shoe, they're gonna cut off my toes. But of course, that's a little kid and that's how they think. But yeah, she should have had bigger shoes. She would be a lot more comfortable now.
It's funny that you say that, because the scissorman, are you familiar with the concept of the scissorman?
Yes.
Okay. Dear listener, for those of you who don't know, the scissorman is a German fairy tale, I guess, that you could say, of a man who would come and cut off the thumbs of people who sucked them too long.
Yeah.
So, JonTron did a fantastic episode, which I recommend you go and watch, on Clock Tower.
Interesting. So is Clock Tower the spooky story?
No, Clock Tower...
Because there's also a comic called Clock Tower that's also a horror/mystery novel.
Clock Tower is a series of video games that follow Scissorman as he kills people.
Got it.
And JonTron's video on that, I think, is his best work. And since it is the season of the spooks and the, scary ghosts, pumpkins, skeletons with guns.
Are there any creepy family history stories surrounding Halloween in your family? Nothing?
No.
Nothing?
No.
Not even like an old tradition that's just so bizarre and weird and creepy that you don't do it anymore?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah, no. The only thing my family does for Halloween is give out candy and eat a snake-themed sandwich.
I'm sorry, that last part? A snake-themed sandwich.
Yeah.
Meaning it's made out of snake meat?
No, although funny, that's what everyone thinks. No,
Okay.
It's a sandwich that looks like a snake. We call it Scary Snake.
I'm sorry, where are you getting the sandwich from that's specifically Halloween-themed sandwiches? Is it like a once-a-month out of the year kind of costume shop, but it's just for Halloween-themed sandwiches?
No, we make a sandwich each year that looks like a snake. This is a thing we do. Martha Stewart told us to do it. We do it.
I'm sorry, are you Martha Stewart zombies? Are you just asking to start your own Martha Stewart channel right now? And the first one to be the snake sandwich? But make it really spoopy.
No. It was just something my dad saw back when I was like 4 or so in a Martha Stewart show. And he started doing it, and we've done it every year since.
How?
Even when we've been out of town for Halloween, we'll go and get the ingredients and make it. And it's simple. It's just your favorite cold cuts on a baguette. You cut up the baguette to make the
body.
Make the body look like it's zigging and zagging, and you put a little piece of bell pepper to make it look like it has a tongue, and the olives for eyes, and boom, you have a snake sandwich. Scary snake.
Wow. That's very adorable. It's very much like your dad.
Yeah, it's just something we do. Literally no one else that does it, but if you've ever been on my Instagram, I post about it every year. What's
the worst Halloween you've ever had?
I've never had a bad Halloween. I've had boring Halloweens, but never a bad one.
Oh, okay.
Like I've actually had the stereotypical joke, but before it was like a thing, of teenagers show up at the house with a door. So they knock and then you open the door and it's a door.
Yeah.
And you knock and they go, oh, hey.
It's like a trick on top of a treat.
Well, yeah, but it's
you're getting both at once.
The joke is that you're the trick-or-treater, to your own house.
I like that.
They didn't give me candy, which is typically what they're supposed to do.
Oh,
but
I will decide to wear that during Halloween with these kids and just be picking up candy that way. Because that's the only way an adult can make candy, is you put a cute little kid in front of the person giving out free candy, and then you grab some yourself, and they can't do anything about it because there are kids in front of you. It's perfect. It's a good way to mug people of candy, I guess you could say.
I suppose. Although I do love the meme that floats around of the guy saying, "This year I'm giving out rotisserie chickens."
Oh my gosh.
And then the comment later on is, "Who gave my kid a chicken?"
Probably the same person who was giving out boxes of raisins last year.
Oh, that's typical. Yeah. The weirdest ones I've ever gotten, like in terms of a give out, was packets of soy sauce. I've also gotten airline peanuts, which it just clicked that made sense.
Okay, you know what I don't get? I don't get how, if you're going to bring out something as horrible as soy sauce packets for Halloween, why don't just not do it at all?
Yeah, I don't get the soy sauce one. But for the longest time, the weirdest thing I ever got was those airline peanuts, but it now makes sense. Like, it just clicked with me as we were saying this now. Like, I remember getting those airline peanuts and going, what the hell is this? You know, like, someone's going to give me old, used, well, not used, but, you know, kind of like worn out airline peanuts.
Yeah, that have gone over half the country, probably been in someone's seat that someone eventually threw up in at some point in that airliner's history. And then taken out, put back in their pocket, and then all the way to their house, and then waited for 6 months just for you to get it.
But it just clicked to me as why that happened to me.
Oh.
That particular neighbor was a family of pilots for an airline.
Oh, so they probably thought it was cute and kitschy and stuff. Okay, that makes sense.
Like, they dressed up in their pilot outfits, which I now get that. Like, I just remember that as a kid going, the hell?
But at the same time, it's like, come on, pilot family. Like, I know you're all happy about your jobs, but this is the day to dress up as something different.
One of the saddest things about that family that's kind of off topic, but it's just kind of cool at the same time, is their living room, which is the same as this room. Mm-hmm. They had all their walls of full-sized flags from every country they flew to. So they had, like, you know...
Did they have a great room with all these flags in it? Or were these just everywhere all over the house?
They were on... No, they were all in their living room, and they were all on flagpoles. Like, just along the walls of the room.
Huh.
It was kind of cool. But
I wish they would have them up on the wall, though, and not on the ground.
Well, I mean, they had hundreds. Like hundreds of flags.
Okay.
So they couldn't, because, you know, the family had been flying since, like, the 60s, and so there were countries there that no longer existed.
Oh, wow.
And all sorts of things. We ended up getting flags from them because they, when they moved, the new house didn't have room for them, so they sold them all. So I have his German and his Belgian flags.
I wish they would have kept them, though. That just seems like they could have sold the whole collection to, like, history of...
Oh, they were just normal, typical flags. There was nothing really special except for the couple countries that didn't exist anymore. But, you know, that people don't care about because they don't exist recently. You know what I mean?
Got it.
So, like, he had the DDR. I just love saying it that way, but the East German flag. And he had a Soviet Union flag, which was cool. And I think that was it in terms of countries that no longer exist.
Okay.
But anyway, that's beside the point. It's just the airline peanuts as a Halloween gift. Candy makes sense now.
Got it.
So, have you seen People Ghost? People Ghosts?
So, I'm not quite sure about this one because I have very vivid dreams as a child, so I'm not sure if it was a dream or a real thing I saw. But I saw it 3 different times, and there was always a woman in a white dress and a man in a red button-up shirt. And it was one of those reds that kind of looks like gasoline when you take it out into the sun. That kind of like, it's been in the sun too long kind of red where it's faded.
I've never seen gasoline as red.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's not gasoline, it's
I think diesel's red.
Diesel.
But that's beside the point.
Yes. So it just looked like the color of diesel. And they would always just stand there on the porch in the exact same place. And the guy would always be smoking a cigarette. And I saw this 3 times the whole time I was living at this house. And it was weird because it was usually in the evenings. It was never at night or anything. There was no bad, you know, energy or whatever you could say about it. So, yeah. Just those 2 people on my porch, the dead dog, and then, well, the murder. Or there's 2, actually. I just realized that makes me sad now that I think about it out loud.
Well, I do have to say that that's what this podcast is about, making people sad. No,
yes.
I mean, making people think. legitimately, since you haven't listened to any of the podcasts before, just to quickly describe this to you, half the point of this podcast is for me and my friends to have a record of our stories.
Awesome, love it.
So even if this doesn't get off the ground, but dear listener, thank you for listening.
You mean this is also blackmail for the future when they change their story and you press their button on your computer and play this back at them?
Oh, we actually had that issue already come up.
Okay.
So a story you'll hear later, dear listener, because of the way these podcasts were recorded and released. I told the story of my encounter with a killer clown. And the thing about it is I distinctly remember that story two separate ways. And the problem is I know it only happened once. So the concept of it happening twice or a similar event happening, and then getting
the
confused.
memory is very uncertain. That's why, like, when you have a person that's actually witnessed a crime, they're much less reliable than the actual forensic evidence, because you can always trick your brain into thinking something else.
And typically I'm pretty good at knowing what I do know and knowing what I don't know and knowing what I think I know. And so the story of my encounter with the killer clown is one of those ones that I think I know. The facts on it are, yes, I had an encounter with a killer clown. Yes, it scared me. No, there was no danger, at least not aware of any danger. And yes, I had a friend with me, a single friend. The rest of the details surrounding it, I don't know, because I remember it two distinctly different ways.
Got it.
And so we were recording this podcast because one of my friends, we were talking about personal scary experiences. And so he told me, you got to tell that story, because this was the story that scared him the most.
All right.
And then I told it to the best of my memory, and he's like, that's not the way you told it last time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I just,
depends on the day, though.
I can't remember. So, I had an encounter with a killer clown, which was nerve-wracking.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to go on about this after this podcast.
Indeed.
So I can hear firsthand.
So, before we get on to the real-life freaky stuff, there's another topic I want to bring up with you, which is the concept of shadow people.
I have not heard of this concept, though I may have heard it under a different name.
Yeah. Black figures that
move along the walls.
Yeah.
Yeah, and touch things, kind of like Peter Pan's shadow kind of thing you're talking about. All right, so what about him?
Oh, I was wondering if you had ever seen any.
The one time I did was a bad week emotionally for me. That was the week where I was, I don't know how to put this out there without me sounding crazy, but this was back in high school before I was taking the medications that I'm on that make me a total normal, happy person.
Everyone has tough times in high school, and so I'm sure our listeners understand.
And I'm sure those of you that know mental disorders know that most of them occur during your teenage years and even early adulthood. And you can't really be sure of yourself until you're 30, and then even after that, you have to watch out for Alzheimer's and dementia. So, a little bit of both. So, about that, what was I going on?
Shadow people. Experience with shadow people.
Yeah, so that was really more of a hallucination. I think I was just exhausted. I hadn't had a lot to eat that day. My parents also were both out of state, so I was alone in a giant house by myself with not enough food, running around the house like a crazy person. At one point in the night, I thought our dog was dead because I put up my hand against his nose and he wasn't breathing. I swear to God, for 5 minutes this dog was not breathing, or was the most relaxed sleeper ever and was breathing through his mouth or something. But this is a big pit bull, so you can usually hear them breathe. So I went as far as, no joke, like getting different corners on the line, like, where do I take the dog to? It's 12 o'clock at night. What am I going to do with a dead dog in the house? My dad's in Nevada. What am I going to do with a dog's body? I don't have a car with me.
But the dog was fine.
Yeah, he ended up coming up, running into the room like, "Hi, what's up? What's going on?" And I'm looking at the dog screaming at him with my mom on the other end of the line, and she's like, "What are you talking about? Like, at least I'm glad everything's fine, but God, Emma, tell me your dog's dead and you're alone." But, it was during that I had a hallucination, and I think this was... 3 weeks also, or no, it wasn't after that. It was some other thing that happened. I think my grandmother had died a month previously. But one of our benches turned into a wolf and barked at me, and, that scared the shit out of me, so I was running and hiding under the covers. And then, of course, the dog that's alive suddenly pops out of the hallway, so I'm just screaming my head off. And, that's the story I think that is the most crazy I've ever been, which is where I accidentally misdiagnosed a dog as dead, and was so tired that I saw a bench turn into a wolf.
I like that you label that as a misdiagnosis.
Instead of me just being crazy. But I think if you know you're crazy and you say you're crazy, then you're sane enough to not actually be crazy. And it's when you can't admit it that there's probably something a little off there.
I wouldn't even say it's a matter of a middle. It's if you believe it. See, that's the thing.
Like when you jokingly say something where you're like, I'm a little bit of this, then you can laugh at it. But when you're like, I know I'm not a psychotic person because I would never imagine killing anyone or doing any harm to anything. Yeah, very different monster. Very different monster. So, do you want to get to the murder part?
Well, yeah, if you're feeling up to it.
Okay, so, disclosure and all of that. So, these people are in my family, and I love them very much. The people who have passed. I'm still very angry with the people who committed these crimes, and whenever I talk about it, I do get a bit upset, which anyone in these situations would and should be.
Yeah.
There's no victim blaming here, and the good thing is mental disorders have come a long way from the past, so we know that it's not the disorder that does it, but the person that does it, and that their combined character with a mental illness when they're already a killer never helps anyone. Unless you're looking for them and they look, exactly the type of crazy you're looking for, then that's a pretty good, like if it's Dennis Nielsen or, Manson or, any of those guys, it's pretty easy to tell they're a bit off. Ed Gein, those people. But in this case, there have been 2 victims in my family and a murderer in my family. So it's been very interesting because I also can only talk to, I think, 2 people in my family about these. Because my family, if anything is done in the past that's a bit dark, you just don't bring it up again.
As is typical with families.
Exactly, and I think it's also might be like a white people thing, where it's just kind of like the drama's past and you don't talk about it anymore. Kind of like in the way that it's like, no, in the way that like a British comedy would do it, kind of like there's a murder that happens, they're like, oh no, go on dearie to school, like no, don't worry about it kind of thing. Kind of blasely take it and just kind of, move it along. So I'll talk about one I wasn't alive for, but of course, if you any of the listeners end up knowing who these people are, please do not ask them about these events, because they are harmful.
You can use pseudonyms as much as possible.
Okay.
That's fine.
So I'll go with Uncle James and Grandma, great-grandma. Okay. So we'll just call her Gigi for great-grandma. So, my dad's side of the family with Gigi and Uncle James was dirt poor. They lived in the South, and my grandmother grew up in a house with 8 kids, in a 1-bedroom cabin with a dirt floor.
Wow.
It was very hard for them. They lived through the Dust Bowl, and they even ended up traveling to California soon after the Dust Bowl. Mostly for giving a better life to their kids. And that's what was done. My parents were, my dad and my aunt were very well taken care of. Unfortunately, some of the family stayed in San Bernardino, and 2 of those members happened to be my Uncle James and Gigi. And at this time, it had just been either a couple months to a year or so. I'm not sure exactly, but great-grandfather passed. And so it's just his eldest son and his mother there. And at this point, my uncle was, I think he was in his late 30s or 40s, so he's still living with his mother. And at this point, he's wearing a monk's cape, like the actual monastery wear. I'm forgetting what it's called. And he was very devout. That whole side of the family is very, very fundamentally Christian. They're very nice people, but they also believe in what they want to believe. And that's totally all right with me as long as you're not hurting anyone. And but they took the religion thing very far, and so when Uncle James was younger, he would do drugs and do things like steal fireworks and pounds and pounds of meat, and then keep them at his storage unit together where the police would find them while he's out doing drugs somewhere. So that's what his past was like. So I think it was a mix of being raised by an alcoholic religious father, a religious mother, and just having those events where he was just not a very good person to begin with, and then the drugs took effect to his mental state and everything just deteriorated. So eventually he ended up having a bad night. And this was definitely likely, I've talked to my aunt about it, who's the only person I can talk to about it who was directly involved, and she said that he's definitely psychotic, and it was probably a psychotic break or something, where he just went full-blown nutso. Because, I can't believe I just said that, that's so... but he did go crazy, and he said, "Mama, let's have our last supper." And so she made him a sandwich, she went back into her room, and there he stabbed her 4 times, lit her bed on fire, took his friend out of the house, walked down the street to the bar, and his friend looks back as they're going down the street and realizes the house is on fire. So he called 911, and the cops picked up Uncle James the next day. He had fallen asleep at his friend's house after drinking himself into sleep. So that whole one was not good, because my grandmother, that was her favorite brother before that happened, and the family was very close, so it was just a big tragedy. And you can never be too sure with drugs what they're gonna do to your mind. But I also, like I said beforehand, think it was a mixture of that and an already kind of messed up mental state, because he had been doing illegal, reckless things earlier, and I think the drugs didn't help that, along with his characteristics and his race, the way he was raised.
Yeah. There's not much more to say about that. That's just sad.
Nobody visited him after the trial.
I would imagine.
And then soon after the trial, my dad says that she started getting a little bit of Alzheimer's, because the last 15 years of her life, she had such bad Alzheimer's that she had to be in a patient care facility. Or she had her husband with her, but after he passed away, she had to go full-time to one of those facilities. So the good thing about that, though, was hopefully she did not remember her brother being that person. And that she had good thoughts of him, because, I mean, it is a terrible disease that she had, but at the very least, some of that pain was taken away. And she still knew her grandchildren sometimes by their faces. and how they sounded like. She would think that we were younger sometimes or different people, but for sometimes she still knew who we were, which was really comforting.
Yeah.
So I'm glad she saw some good stuff. The next one.
Just pounding them out. Oh.
Yeah, I guess you can say. Well, it's because it's uncomfortable to talk about, and I don't want it to sound like like I'm one of those people who's just saying it to get attention, but I think it's important that people get their weird shit out, so other people who have the same kind of thing can have someone to talk to and relate to. For example, I think families of people who are murderers and other people who are related to those people really need to have their own groups of, this is not our fault, this was a character flaw. That is, of course, if you're not one of those crazy people who ended up hurting your kid and then they also went crazy afterwards on top of all of that, and what have you that went along. But it's good to not feel totally guilty, especially when you're like the mother or the sibling of one of these people. It's not your fault. You shouldn't be blamed for that kind of stuff, especially when the person was, say, a really good murderer and they had these things shut away in a storage unit and you'd never seen it before, So you never really know. Just be safe, kids, I guess.
Indeed. And yeah, as you were saying earlier, it really is important for people to understand that, every situation is unique.
Yes.
But every situation is... not every situation has some thread to something else. So just because something weird has happened to you doesn't mean weird things haven't happened to other people. Mm-hmm. And you could find some sort of solace in the fact that they've made it through as well.
And some solidarity as well, I think.
Yeah.
There's also, I definitely think you should be listening to this podcast because it's kind of similar to this one. We'll
talk about that later.
Okay, we'll talk about that later. Got it. Yeah, if your husband happens to be a pedophile and you divorce him right after, how are you going to ever let your kid know this guy if he's in prison? Like, how do you deal with that as a mother? These kind of things I feel people really should have groups for, because I think it's important for their mental health, because, it's nothing that they can really directly handle by themselves without a little help. It must be very hard. So the second murder, and this one gets me the most emotional because for a long time he was my father figure. I got to know him because him and my mom dated for about 4 years on and off. And he happened to be a psychologist and an attorney, and he was just an amazing man. He kind of worked himself up from the gutter, so to speak. He was a very smart kid, and he would kind of sass the teachers, imagine the full leather jacket, but pizza face, and just kind of saying screw you, but in a way that's polite and / you're teaching the wrong information and you're trying to get me to come down off of my right answer because you want to hold the power here. Mm-hmm. That's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. Should be back and forth, and he wouldn't stand for that kind of stuff. Eventually, of course, got out of that because he became an adult and a psychiatrist and an attorney. So can't exactly hold that attitude all the time. Pretty sure you would not be allowed in court at some point.
You don't,
especially if you're picking fights with exactly. And you can look up this article on SACB of Chris Hurd. Amazing man. And so he, in fact, I think it was a couple weeks before he passed away, we talked for the last time. His last message to me was happy birthday, and I still feel so guilty for never sending him anything back, because I would love to hear from him and have a conversation with him again. And the conversation before that was about how the symbolic fear of certain prey items, prey animals like snakes and hounds and things, were meant to also portray emotional fears as well. And we were talking about monsters in Greek and Roman mythology and what exact fear they were pointing to. And so you could just talk to him about any subject matter. I mean, when we were having these conversations, I remember we were both pacing in our kitchens, and he's all the way in Sacramento and I'm down in Southern California. And at the very end of the conversation, I was like, I kind of hear some music in the background. Are you watching TV or something? He's like, oh no, I pace in my kitchen from time to time. And we both happened to be doing the exact same thing, and I never knew anyone else did that. So it was just like one of those weird people that happens to come into your life that was just like meant to be. Because I really needed like a male figure for me there at that time. Just because most of the men in my life were not emotionally there or not physically there at all.
Yeah.
And you know, that happens, you know, people have work and they want to, you know, feed their families before they feel for their families. So, you know, sometimes it happens. But anyway, going on with the story. He had texted my mom 2 weeks before his murder, if anything happens to me, please take care of my cats. So at that point, we both knew something's wrong. We need to call the police or something. My mom said we shouldn't get involved. Nothing's happened yet. You can't do anything, though, because there's no proof yet. He hasn't said anything specific. In the report of his body, when they found him, I'm sorry, after they found him, he died on the way to the hospital. They found bruise marks on his throat. And they believed they had forced down 2 bottles of wine down his throat. He did not ever drink like that. I have never seen him have more than 1 drink, maybe 2. But he never drank in excess. Never. And then his house had magically gone on fire the same night as well. And so he had basically been pushed out onto his couch, strangled, and kept his throat open so they could get the alcohol down in there. And I'm guessing this is after or before they beat him up and then lit his house on fire, because obviously the alcohol probably worked to either put him to sleep or something. Yeah. By the time they got to him, the house was completely consumed in flames, and I believe it was 85% of his body that was burnt from the fire. So he was on his way by the time he got in the ambulance. Yeah. But the thing that really freaked me out is they killed the cats too. They didn't have to. The cats aren't freaking eyewitnesses. They're cats. And I can, soon after that incident, I was just, hearing screaming cats when I would sleep, and I would just cry and cry thinking about these cats, and can't, and I'm not a cat person either, but just to think this innocent thing has been killed. For no good reason. And it was the same with him, but, he knew what was fully going on, and I think that's just the way that he wanted to play it out. So, but unfortunately that's what happened instead of something else, where they could have caught these people, or who knows, but the investigation is still open. So hopefully they'll find the key to the men who killed him, because they think at least 2 people took him. Because I think he was a black belt in something. I forget what he did, but he definitely did martial arts, so it had to be, at least 2 big men, because he was 6'4" and a big muscular guy, so yeah, I don't know. Well, it's still open, so I just hope it never gets cold. And with the way that, for example, the East Area Rapist, they got him on DNA. And, and it's funny because I was on a cruise and I ended up talking to the inspector, and he's like, oh yeah, we just have to get all the political BS over with, because I'm right now talking to the FBI on just getting his piece of DNA that only this one station had, that they didn't have anywhere else in California, because they had already tested it way early back in the 70s and 80s, and this is the only piece left that had not been tested or tampered with. So when it went to the FBI, that's when they found the man that is now known as the East Area Rapist and is going through trial in order to pay for those crimes.
Well, I've never heard of him, so...
What?
Yeah. I remember this.
People that are listening to this podcast, you have got to yell at him in the comments that he's never heard of the East Area Rapist. I mean, come on! He's such a big deal. When I was little, my parents would tell me, if you hear a sound of a baby crying, that might be someone trying, and I think they even pointed to him, or someone who was trying to copycat him or something, because I think there was some point in time where the East Area Rapist and the Southern California rapes weren't pieced together yet, but it was someone leaving the recordings of a baby crying outside of women's houses, apparently, and the women would walk out going, oh God, there's a baby, and that's when they would get you. So, you know.
Moral of the story, let the baby die.
Yeah.
Sorry. Low-hanging fruit.
Call the police, basically. If it's a baby, they will be there on time. I mean, it's Southern California. There's not a lot going on in our neighborhood, really, when it comes to crime.
Oh, no, actually.
No.
There's been a big uptick in crime in our area recently.
In Huntington specifically, or Southern California?
Well, it's Southern California in general, but in Huntington, too.
Especially?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know especially.
Do you know the reason for it? Is there any cause and effect known?
Nope.
Just that the effect is worse crime?
Yeah, a lot of petty stuff, but a lot of property damage.
Okay.
A bunch of cars have been being set on fire recently in Huntington Beach, like a car or so a day.
Wow.
For like the last week. And then not last night, but the night before last, someone set 5 cars on fire.
Do you think this could be someone... Do you think this
They're
could be
catching multiple
related
people.
to drug use, though?
No.
Okay. I only asked this because in my neighborhood, a man was on heroin and took a bowling ball and just walked down the street of my neighborhood and broke the windows of, I think, it was at least 70 cars. So smashed all the windows of 70 cars going down the street before the police got him. And so they even had, to have a whole committee meeting on everyone, getting whatever money they needed from the community that they, because they didn't stop this from happening, so, yeah.
Well, at least we had a little bit of positivity at the end. Anyway.
Thank you for listening to my ramblings, people.
So, thank you for joining me.
Of course.
And thank you as well, dear listener. Until next time, see you out there.